After Donald Trump announced that MAGA loyalist and unqualified conspiracy theorist Kash Patel would be running the FBI in his next administration, only one thing potentially stood in the way. Christopher Wray, the man Trump chose to run the FBI after firing James Comey in 2017, still had multiple years left on his 10-year term. While Trump could fire Wray just like he did Comey, Wray's presence, combined with questions about Patel making it through a tough confirmation hearing, presented a possible alternative. Well, that barrier was removed on Wednesday by Wray himself, as he told his staff that he would resign at the end of Biden's term in January. So we are now one step closer to Patel and his self-described enemies list, running America's principal federal law enforcement agency and domestic intelligence service. Now, if you weren't concerned already, then this is when you really should start to pay attention, especially at Patel's enemies list, in addition to his clear lack of qualifications. And you should worry, because history has shown how dangerous it is when the power of the FBI is misused. That history starts with this guy, J. Edgar Hoover, the man whose name actually adorns FBI headquarters and who built the Bureau in his image. Hoover led the FBI for 48 years and may be the most influential unelected bureaucrat in all of American history. While he served under 4 Democratic presidents and 4 Republican presidents, he was very ideologically conservative. And as he grew that bureau and its powers, he actually began to use it for devious means. He used it as a weapon against the civil rights movement, most famously by spying and attempting to blackmail Martin Luther King Jr. FBI records have since been uncovered that reveal their plans to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize individuals and organizations involved in the fight for black rights. And others, too, anti-war groups, environmental activists, and many elements of the American left. For decades after Hoover's death in 1972, it was liberals who had deep antipathy for the FBI, and rightfully so. The Bureau had abused its power and gone to war with the left. Yet all these years later, it is the MAGA right that has gone to war with the FBI because of the delusion that the department is some sort of left-wing organization because they occasionally have caught Donald Trump committing crimes. It's complete nonsense. Hoover established it as an organization hell-bent on attacking the American left. And since then, its leadership has been dominated by Republicans. That's because when Republicans are in the White House, they choose Republicans to lead the FBI. And when Democrats are in the White House, well, they also choose Republicans to lead the FBI. In the aftermath of the Watergate scandal, Democrat Jimmy Carter named Republican William H. Webster to head the Bureau in 1978. Democrat Bill Clinton named Republican Louis Freeh as FBI director. Democrat Barack Obama extended the term of one Republican FBI head, Robert Mueller, and replaced him with another Republican, James Comey, who had served as Deputy Attorney General in, wait for it, George W. Bush's administration. So this MAGA make-believe story that the FBI is somehow a lefty, woke, commie conspiracy organization is simply delusional. Both liberals and conservatives should want an independent, fair, and apolitical Justice Department. So it's important to state this very clearly. That is not who Kash Patel is, nor what he is promising to do. Instead, he is promising to turn the Bureau into exactly what he accuses it of. He claims the FBI is a partisan political organization that goes after its enemies. So he's promising to use it as a partisan political organization that goes after Trump's enemies. Hoover reminds us of what an unhinged FBI can do, particularly when a lawless president like Richard Nixon is actually backing him. They did great damage to this country. While there are more institutional guardrails now, certainly on the FBI since the time of Hoover and Nixon, we can expect people like Patel and Trump to do their best to remove those guardrails or perhaps even to eliminate them. We know this because that's exactly what they're telling us they're going to do. So we should take them at their word. Kicking us off tonight, Barbara McQuade, MSNBC legal analyst, former U.S. attorney and law professor at the University of Michigan Law School, and Harry Litman, former U.S. attorney, former deputy assistant attorney general, and host of the Talking Feds podcast. 2 experts to talk to about this subject. Barbara, it seems, and I saw our esteemed colleague Frank Figliuzzi mentioned this earlier. Some people are upset with Christopher Wray making this announcement, saying it's a sign of obeying in advance and making Kash Patel's path to the nomination a little bit easier. Perhaps some senators now can point to it and say we have to get someone in there quickly since Christopher Wray is stepping down at the end of Biden's term. Your thoughts on that? Is that a fair criticism?
Yes. I think that Christopher Wray said, I take him at his word when he says he spent many weeks discussing this issue and that the reason he is stepping down is to prevent the FBI from being further dragged into the fray. I'm sure he believes he's doing the right thing for the rank and file FBI agents. But to me, this is a breach of norms. The FBI director serves a 10-year term in part to insulate him from the political process so that he can exceed even a two-term president. And so by resigning, I know he'll get fired on day one, but it seems to me maybe we should make Donald Trump do that. So it's Trump who's violating the norms rather than Christopher Wray going quietly.
Harry, what do you think? I mean, it seems like a no-win situation. As Barbara said, and as everyone expects, and as Donald Trump has made clear, Christopher Wray was going to get fired. But having Trump fire Christopher Wray sends a very different message for most Americans who may not necessarily be hearing about Christopher Wray's resignation. They will certainly hear about Trump firing the FBI director, who we should note is the second time that has happened, and both times have happened because of Donald Trump.
Right. And the last time, at least, he purported to find reasons. This time, not even. I think Barb has it exactly. I agree with everything that she said. I'll just add, Eamon, that you're talking about norms eroding. Maybe the most important is this one that was set up post-Watergate and post-abuses of Hoover to say 10 years. That means that any given FBI director is going to be independent, doesn't have to worry as he gets to the end of his term that the new guy is going to come in and sack him if he doesn't do things right. That, I think, is pretty much gone now. Possibly to be restored, but possibly not. So we're really seeing the damage already. And as for, well, let me just stop there and say, yeah, I agree 100% with Barb.
So, Barbara, the New York Times is reporting that Patel is getting a warm welcome from Senate Republicans as he's making his visits on the Hill. It highlights how the GOP has now fully adopted this anti-FBI position that Trump has created over the past, 8 years or so since he has been on the political scene. And Patel fits perfectly in that Trump narrative. He says he wants to shut down the FBI Hoover building, reopen it as a museum to the deep state. He's accused the FBI of manufacturing crimes. Of course, he's publicized his enemies list. And, I went through some of the history of the Bureau and how it's anything but a liberal or progressive institution. But how did this narrative of the GOP turn on the FBI so quickly?
Yes, well, Eamon, first, let me just say it's completely false. It's complete nonsense. I worked closely with members of the FBI for 20 years. And I think sometimes people who are so deeply partisan cannot understand the concept of nonpartisan. The FBI is nonpartisan. Even J. Edgar Hoover, through all his abuses, tried to keep it nonpartisan. He had his views about things. And so this narrative, this idea that it is somehow the deep state, he even equates in his book the deep state and Democrats. I mean, we're talking about William Barr is somebody he accuses of being part of the deep state. Pat Cipollone, the White House counsel under Donald Trump, he accuses as being part of the deep state. Here's a secret. There is no deep state. You have people who are career professionals working to make sure process is done fairly without fear or favor of either side. And so my concern is that Donald Trump has spun this narrative, and there are those either who believe it or others who are willing to go along with the con because they are too afraid to pay the political cost of taking on Donald Trump.
Harry, Fox is reporting this week on a conservative group called the American Accountability Foundation sending a letter Trump's Attorney General, for now nominee, Pam Bondi, calling on her to fire a number of Department of Justice workers who say it says are woke radical leftists and donors who cannot be trusted to carry out Trump's agenda. How did this idea that law enforcement is somehow woke come into being, and where did that start from? I mean, is this a sign of the coming purge that we can expect
well, look,
under
I
Trump?
think it may well be. You're talking about in Patel, a guy who says the mission, the agency he would lead is and poses an existential threat to our Republican form of government. So yes, there's been deep drinking of Kool-Aid that says basically it all traces back to whoever has helped prosecute Donald Trump for, oh, can we just say it again, very legitimate charges. And that's where all of this comes from and leads to. So, you know, at the end of the day, it's either true or it's false. And as Barb says, it's just demonstrably false, yet pretty soon you're going to have, think about this, just close your eyes and take the United States out of that equation. And this is what you've heard, the person who thinks the Bureau is a deep state and the list by neighbors of whom you should purge from the Justice Department. This is not the kind of thing that happens in the DOJ or a democratic state normally.